And welcome to a historic event for the National Education Union. Today's event is called Black Lives Matter, How Can We Keep Hope Alive? A solidarity webinar with campaigners from the United States and UK. I'm Vik Chechi-Ribeiro, science teacher, Premkumar School, Multi-Academy Trust, and for the West Black Organising Forum. Our union needed to show solidarity across borders and with those in the US. Now is not the time for our own agendas, but to pull together to build an anti-racist education system and society that is based on our shared global history. The Black Lives Matter movement, the US, has highlighted the oppression and reality of living in the United States as a Black person. As protests about police and state violence has also highlighted racial and economic injustices and questions on the distribution of wealth and power in the US and other countries. A movement has inspired millions across the world to demand liberation from oppression in the workplace and on the streets. The NEU uses Black in a political context to encompass all members who self-identify as Black, Asian, and any other minority ethnic group. We are not anti-white, but pro-Black. All are welcome and indeed necessary for anti-racist work. Our union is hoping this meeting will be a catalyst for decolonising education, which has used an anti-racist framework to ensure that it embraces the fact that Britain is rooted in Black and global history, achievement and culture of Black Britons. Around initial teacher training to equip all training teachers with anti-racist strategies and tools for the benefit of all students. Looking at exclusion, so for example, Black students are more likely to be excluded from school, so looking around anti-racist work in that area, and also more broadly speaking around Black children and young people issues. So looking at the presence of school-based police officers, poverty, well-being, bullying, racism, safeguarding access as entertainment. As we know, Black students, Black workers and Black communities all face worse outcomes in all these, something that's been really highlighted through this coronavirus pandemic. And also looking at building anti-racism in the union and movement, including wanting members, Black members and other members becoming more active in their union, becoming workplace reps, supporting the work of organising forums and equalities. Some housekeeping, the behaviour statement is in the chat. If anyone is abusive or discriminatory, they will be ejected, and extreme circumstances, which we hope won't happen, the chat function will be shut down. The chat is recorded, so please keep all comments professional. There is a question and answer function. Please put your name in it and who you want it to be addressed to. If possible, try and hear some contributions first before submitting the questions. Otherwise, we don't want our tech team becoming overloaded, okay? Also, not all questions can be answered today, but the tech team will pass as many as they can. And on the tech team, we have Henry Fowler, Craig Arden, Andy Jackson, Matt Goodman, Amy Hunt, and Vin. We are also recording, so if you don't want to be seen, just turn your video off. And for those of you on social media, you can use the hashtag NEUBLM. The format of today's meeting is going to be 3 groups of 2 and 3 speakers, each followed by a question and answer. First group, we're going to have the Reverend Jesse Jackson Snr, Courtney, the Joint General Secretary of the NEU, then some question and answers. Then we're going to have Karina Maloney, Christel Williams-Hayes, DanielKebede, then some question and answers. And then our final group, we're going to have Venda, Premkumar, Diane Abbott MP, with some more question and answers, and we'll aim to finish at around 4:30. So our first speaker is the Reverend Jesse Jackson Snr. Our union is really honoured to have him, and it's a mark of his long-standing work of anti-racism that he's agreed to join us today. And he's someone with a long history of anti-racist solidarity work with the UK. The Reverend Jesse Jackson Snr is the founder and president of the Rainbow Push Coalition, one of America's foremost civil rights, religious and political figures. Over the past 40 years, he has played a pivotal role in virtually every movement for empowerment, peace, civil rights, gender equality, economic and social justice. Reverend Jackson was also awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honour. Reverend Jackson also had 2 presidential campaigns, which both broke new ground in US politics. His 1984 campaign registered over 1 million new voters, won 3.5 million votes, and helped the Democratic Party regain control of the Senate in 1986. His 1988 campaign registered over 2 million new votes, won 7 million votes, and helped boost hundreds of local officials into office. Additionally, he won historic victories, coming in first or second in 46 out of 54 primary contests. His clear progressive agenda and his ability to build an unprecedented coalition inspired millions to join the political process. So, big honour. I'm going to pass over to the Reverend Jesse Jackson Snr. Over to you. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, is Karen there? Diane Abbott, good morning, Diane. Can you hear me?
Here,
Yeah,
Reverend.
hear you.
Here, Reverend.
Let me say, first of all, I'm delighted to be with you today. And it's a perfect storm in America. You have the COVID-19 coronavirus. They have over lockdown for about 3 months. It's been effective, really. You have the cold blue with police killing Black people, poverty and disparities. And the president of the United States was hostile to our interests. It all lead to a kind of combustion of forces in America today. I want to say this to you today also, that starting with the Black Lives Matter. What happened was that Trayvon Martin was killed in Florida, along with some skittles. Diallo was shot and 41 times, and the police walked away free. Diallo was killed in his doorway in New York, unarmed, 41 times, police walked away free. Eric Garner choked to death before the whole world saw it on television, walked away free. And then Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri. So I say, well, don't Black Lives Matter? I mean, the Black Lives Matter. I mean, we are being killed, but no consequences. It's one thing to be killed, but no consequences. So it kind of morphed into a movement now where Black Lives Matter means not just skin color, but a way of thinking. It's a school of thought. Black Lives Matter means inclusion, means hope and healing. And the beautiful part about the struggle in America today is that it has become worldwide. Someone said to me the other day, so, you know, people in Britain and France march with us. You do know that Wilberforce and the force of Britain marched with us, they end slavery. And same is true with France and slavery. Remember, the Statue of Liberty is a gift to America from France. It's on the Seine River today. Granted, it's slavery and saving the Union. So these struggles have always been international. The other part of it is that we have the need to deal with the impact of violence against Black people in this country. Between 1880 and 1950, after slavery, 2 and 4 years of slavery, 5,000 Blacks were lynched. Some of them after church on Sunday, some of the whole towns were wiped out. Trump is saying about going to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then during the war, Blacks were doing quite well there. And the whites attacked them, killed 300 Blacks plus, put 8,000 in internment camps. And others, when we were in trains, never came back. So 300 may be a low number that were killed. We faced these massacres and racial violence down through the years. But now there's a sense of resistance. I would dare say if George was killed in Minnesota, if it had not been filmed on television live, we wouldn't know it happened. because we would believe the police version of it. In America, we have a lot of race supremacists disguised as policemen. They're very violent. And in the early part of the 60s, when the riots occurred in Detroit and LA and Newark and Chicago, it was always triggered by some police act of humiliation. But I would remind people today, as we discuss education today, police represents the outer perimeter of the problem. They're the epidermis. Police represent the guards at the gate. Police do not have the power to change the system. In some sense, you have police who are guarding the gates, but what's behind the gate is the real issue. My concern today is that with all the focus on police behavior, Mandela did not go to jail in South Africa after 27 years for better police behavior. Change the system. Mugabe, change the system. We're trying to dress up a pig in America. But perfume on the pig is real different, but the pig is the pig. This issue of racial injustice is pervasive. It is not just in the police behavior. Police, how can I put it? Their job is they're the epidermis of the system. Racism is bone deep. In Britain and America, race supremacy is the foundation. Believe race is supreme, blacks are inferior. The whole body of work, academic work and practical work built around blacks being inferior, whether they're from in India or whether they're from the Caribbean or whether they're from Africa, and inferior. We reject that idea. I think that today, I want to make a distinction between police who are the outer realm of the problem and those who are the inner circle. So for example, Karen, in America today, police who patrol the ghetto, they don't control it. And that's the difference. Police patrol poor areas, don't control it. In America, we were denied the right to vote in 1896. The decision was made, separate equal. Separate the races, but no equality in resources. So blacks were denied the right to vote for 69 years. Well, we denied the right to vote. We discovered radio. All the decisions issued by LADA. We got no radio station. TV, banking, education, healthcare. If every police in America was civil and kind today, we still on a single building in downtown America, downtown Britain. We still wouldn't have equality of education. So I want to put focus on stopping uncivilized police behavior. We don't confuse that the absence of police violence is not the presence of education equality. And that requires investment. In closing, I says, you look at the soccer matches in London, football in America. Why are we so good at football in Britain or in America, South Africa? Because we have the playing field is even, rules are public, goals clear, referees fair, and scores transparent, we can make it. We're not, beyond the football field, the playing field is not even. Rules are not public. Goals not, the referees not fair, score not transparent. So there we're fighting for equality. Many of our freedom of our lives are not our equality of our lives. But freedom of our lives are not equality of our lives. That is to say that some whites are embarrassed by George Floyd being choked to death, embarrassed by dogs biting children in Birmingham. They're against barbarism, but they're not for equality. Freedom in the absence of barbarism is not the presence of economic justice. I says to you again today, I share radios, TV stations, I share economic justice, I share education, access to major universities is a theme of our time. So it's not enough to have civilized police. Man doesn't go to jail for civilized police, go to jail to end the system of race supremacy. And there are those who are race supremacists and don't know it. They're conscious of it. It's hard to swim in the race supremacist water for 346 years and say you're not wet. Those born believing whites are superior. They believe that in their gut, in their bones. We must dispel the notion that there's a superior race. We're all God's children. If one of us on the planet, they're going to Britain and one going to LA, it's about the same time, about a 6-hour flight. There are no more foreigners in this world. There are no more foreigners. We all live in one world order. So that's why a virus in China can make the world stand still. Lynching in Minnesota can make the world stand still because there are no more foreigners. I look forward to working with you, come back to Britain again, because I think that we should not take this season lightly. Superficial answers, as to say that police shoots the black, and we, as I often say that when whites shoot blacks, we rebel. Black shoots whites, we jail. Black shoot blacks, we shrug our shoulders. Nobody has the right to kill anybody. We must stop the killing, stop the violence, and learn to live together as civilized people. So I want to thank you for letting me share with you today, and I'm open for discussion. Thank you so much.
Excellent, some really, really powerful words there, Reverend Jackson Senior. So for me, what's really interested in hearing is around you spoke about the police being on the outer layer, and so tackling those individual racist police officers doesn't look at the wider system and the wider system of white supremacy and racial injustice. So thank you very much for those powerful words.
Police don't control discrimination in manufacturing, healthcare disparities, lack of opportunity, lack of salary, lack of wages. They're the guardians. They are of the system. Be sure that they patrol the system. They don't control. They patrol. They're basically low middle class workers. We give them extraordinary powers with those guns, and here they call them extrajudicial powers. They kill people, and they incite people to fight back. They patrol, they don't control. Those who control the forces must be dealt with. Those who control it, not just those who patrol it.
Thank you. We're going to bring our next speaker and then have some questions for you, Reverend. So our next speaker is Courtney, who is Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. Kevin is passionate about fighting racism and all inequalities. He believes in inclusive education that is fair and free from discrimination, which puts equity, mental health and well-being at its heart, and has an emphasis on nurturing and engaging pedagogies to enable learners to become people who care about others, social justice and the natural environment. I'm going to hand over to you, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Vic. It is such an honour to be here with the Reverend Jesse Jackson Snr and Diane Abbott MP, leaders in the US and the UK who made such huge contributions to the struggle for race equality. And it's also an honour to be on the call with educators from Chicago and educators from the UK. From the US to the UK, we say that Black Lives Matter too. We say the appalling waste of human lives and human potential, whether through unlawful murder or through the soft violence of inequality, this appalling waste has to stop. We say that politicians and governments must act now to bring this horror and this waste to a stop. We say it's not a time for patience or a time for inquiries, it's a time for action. People, educators, trades unionists, they must press governments and politicians to take action in the immediate. There is only one fitting memorial to George Floyd, to Breonna Taylor, to Cynthia Jarrett, to Joy Gardner. That is that we dedicate ourselves to the proposition that everyone's life should be equal, that everyone matters, that Black Lives Matter too. For educators, we must focus specifically on the questions of the experiences of Black children and Black families in our school system and those of Black teachers and Black support staff. I need to explain that, like Vik said earlier, that when I'm speaking and using the word black, I do not mean by it specifically Afro-Caribbean. My union uses black as a term to encompass all those oppressed by institutional and structural racism. So we include Afro-Caribbeans, South Asians, East Asians, and other ethnic groups. We use it in the way that many people in the US use the term people of color. We say all ethnic groups deserve equality, and we see that all those oppressed by structural, institutional, casual, or far-right racism have interests together. And we say that white compatriots must be part of this fight, that it is not the duty of black people to fight racism, it's a duty that falls to all of us. And I want to be clear that in my view, there is no zero-sum game for the disadvantaged. If we deal with the inequality facing black people, then we will also be dealing with the inequality facing poor white people as well. Education is the great liberator. As Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Education is and must be part of society-wide effort for equity, but steps need to be taken if that promise is to be fulfilled. And this historical moment is the moment to press for those steps. When we look at our education system, we see inequality. We see the inequality in our school system as part of the inequality in our society as a whole. We see inequalities in education that are replicated in employment, in healthcare, in housing. We see them in the statistics around average salaries, around average lifespan. Structural racism and inequality in all those areas should be addressed if we're to be serious about saying that all lives have equal status, and Black Lives Matter too. In our schools, we see there are far fewer black teachers than the proportion of black people in the country. These shortages are more pronounced in some ethnic groups than others, but they're lower across the piece. And as a consequence, we see far fewer black people in school leadership positions. The children in our schools see far fewer black people involved in education. When they do see them, they often see them in the more lowly positions, vital but lowly, as school dinner staff, as school cleaners. And then when we look at the results that children get from the exams, we see that black children, alongside disadvantaged white children, get fewer good grades in an exam system that rations grades. Where each year, 38% of children are told they haven't reached the standard pass grade in English GCSE. And we see it's disproportionately black and white working class children in that 38%. Ask yourself, what is the point of an education system which, instead of telling children, telling their employers what they have achieved, instead tells nearly 4 in 10 children each year that they haven't passed the exam in English? We must not be satisfied in solutions where some black children survive a zero tolerance approach and get to Oxbridge, and when very many other black children are excluded from schools and fall by the wayside. So we do need to challenge the situation where black children, Afro-Caribbean boys in particular, alongside their working class white classmates, are excluded so often and excluded disproportionately. And when you look at the curriculum that is required by the government for GCSE exams, there is no serious attempt to address the lives of black people, to examine the contribution they have made to this country today and to world culture and world civilization. I am not in favor of whitewashing history. I'm in favor of really exploring the history, of looking at the history of Edward Colston, for example, of looking at his generosity to good causes in Bristol, and of looking at the historical fact that the money he gave to charitable causes was a direct product of mass murder, of racism, and of slavery. The government must systematically examine these issues and take forward immediate actions to challenge them. There are issues facing black staff as well. Each year since 2014, my union, the NEU, has written to the government to say that our black members in surveys tell us they're less likely to get performance-related pay than their white colleagues. So do teachers on maternity leave, by the way. But each year the government fails to carry out any proper investigation into this inequality or to do the sensible thing and remove performance-related pay in the first place. This meeting is really significant. We have upwards of 4,000 people on this call. We have educators from the United States and educators from the United Kingdom. We have senior leaders of the black struggle in both nations. We have trades unionists from both countries. This meeting is a memorial to George Floyd, but it will only be meaningful if we use it to press for real, meaningful change. So today, my union is writing to the government in the UK, to demand action on each and every aspect of racial discrimination and structural racism in our school system, on the questions of staffing, on the questions of exams, on the questions of curriculum, of exclusions, on the question of initial teacher training. On each matter, we need meaningful action to take place. We need the government, if it is serious, to adopt a program of action on each item and to report progress on a regular basis. We join our voice to the thousands of voices calling for action. We invite you to join our calls on our government. We will share with you the letter. We want you to press your MP to support it, to say that they should support these calls to action. We invite you to ask your local council to sign up to these calls for action and to adopt a program of action themselves. In the next weeks, we will launch an anti-racist framework for schools that has been developed in conjunction with the Black members of our union. We invite you to set up local groups of school staff who want to decolonize the curriculum, who want to produce an equal curriculum that would allow all of our children to access the history of our country and the world. There are thousands of teachers making that effort now. We urge them to collaborate and to involve others. As I said earlier, there's only one fitting memorial to George Floyd, to Breonna Taylor, to Cynthia Jarrett, and to Joy Gardner. And that is that we dedicate ourselves to the proposition that everyone's life is equal, that everyone matters, that action must be taken so it is clear that Black lives matter too. Thank you for listening and good luck in your struggles.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Really, really powerful words, particularly around teaching the truth. And for all NEU members, keep an eye out for that anti-racist framework. Head teachers, they want those conversations around equalities and anti-racism. So as members, as educators, we need to be leading on them. So we're going to move on to some questions now. So I've got two questions for the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. The first one is from Sarah Ahmed, who says, do you think defunding the police is the answer to police brutality? What do you think are the alternatives? And the second question is from Alison Bajakan. When you're done being tired of our situation, how do you get up every morning and keep going? Where do you draw your strength from besides God and multivitamins?
Defunding police really means police right now are doing services that are not police functions. They become, crime is going down, police power is going up. They have the ability, for example, when you saw on television, police pushing a 75-year-old man down, he was blind, bleeding, and they were chastised. 47 policemen resigned that post. The mayor could not fire them because they developed the powers in their unions to protect themselves from accountability. When George Floyd was killed in Minnesota, and the police was arrested, first time police had been arrested in the history of Minnesota for killing a Black. 1,000 police kill people a year in the States. 1,000 people killed a year. Also, you have the case where 96% of the police don't live in Minneapolis. They're not neighbors. They come in as outside gunslingers every day. I'm also concerned that inheritance and effort means a lot. Hard work and effort means a lot. Inheritance and access means more. So that the building, the structural advantages, whites, poverty is legal. Secondly, education is legal. We must somehow figure out a way to make poverty legal, because it's not natural. It's normal. It's not natural. My faith comes from, I was jailed July 16, 1960. Trying to use the public library in Greenville, South Carolina. 1960, 60 years, July 16th. All my life I fought for justice and for caring. Along the way, I found that people of all persuasions do care. And when it's real dark, a little light will do you. So we fought we fought for the libraries. Then Dr. King gave the address in Washington. I have a dream speech from Texas to Maryland. We could use a single public toilet. We won that battle. We had the right, but we wanted better. Dr. King was killed. There were 2 black mayors in Gary and Cleveland. The black mayor in Atlanta, Augusta, Savannah, Georgia, Montgomery, Alabama. We're growing politically in our country, but the evils of racial suppression, and voter suppression have not been rooted out, and that's our task. I'm inspired by the journey, frankly.
Okay, thank you. Got 2 questions now for Kevin Courtney. The first one is from Rachel Gill. We are starting to work on decolonising the curriculum as a group of NEU reps with our senior managers. Do we wait for a national response or go ahead with lots of the resources and research available? The second question from Eleanor Paul. With talks of rewriting the aspects of the curriculum to include historical events that our children are unschooled in, what input will the NEU have and how will it ensure that the objectives are meaningful and written by knowledgeable people? That's 2 questions for you, Kevin.
Thank you, Vic, and 2 very closely linked questions, I think. And can I just say thank you to the Reverend Jesse Jackson Snr for the fantastic contributions he's made and for being on this call. I would not wait for material from headquarters. If you've got a group of NEU reps that are already working on this, we've already had a decolonising education conference. We know there are thousands of teachers working on these issues, and I think we should be working on them now. There are history teachers who are looking at how to do this. There are teachers in every subject looking at this, and I think grassroots work is really important in it. And I think that will answer the second question. For us to have influence in terms of what the government does at a national level, it's much stronger if we can point to work being done at local level and use that to influence the national. So I think carry on with the work, join up in groups, put your name in the chat and ask other people to contact you, work on it together and let us know in head office what you're doing. There is no one monopoly of wisdom on how best to do this, and your views and the excitement of working on something from below because you know it really matters. I think capturing that excitement and getting on with it is the right way to go.
Let me say, I'm concerned with some data we have here that 21 Oxford College took no black students last year, none. Oxford and Cambridge has been shown in official data, more than 20 Oxford colleges made no offers to black candidates. The top universities in Britain have some obligation to include people of color. Why should I have a monopoly on intelligence? That's a supremacist proposition. When we learn together, we grow together. We must learn vertically and horizontally. If you're white, you're oriented a certain way from first grade on, kindergarten on to the university. You have a certain view of life. It's vertical. Much of life is horizontal. I said in the graduation students, number 1, students in Britain and Brixton are the survivors. Life is not a straight line. White folks don't have a monopoly on information. White people do not have a monopoly on information. We must figure out a way to include people at every level who bring different attributes to the education table.
Thank you, Reverend Jesse Jackson Snr. We're going to move on to our next section now, but you are very welcome to stay in the call if you wish to do so. But if not, no, many thanks. It's been a real sort of pleasure and honour sort of listening and sort of sharing your wealth experiences with us today. Our next speaker is Karina Maloney, who is a Black organiser and has been central to the NEU's work on anti-racism. She's also a primary school teacher, rep and equalities officer from Lewisham, South East London. Just handing over to you, Karina.
Thank you very much, Vic. I'd just like to say that it's an honour to be on this panel, first of all, with Reverend Jackson Snr and Diane Abbott. The Black Lives Matter movement is a global movement, and it's really highlighted the systemic racism and inequalities within our society, from hundreds of years of oppression to racism within our healthcare system, and to the erasure of the African and Caribbean presence within our history books. The inequalities within our education system have really been brought to the forefront. And right now, everyone is seeing how much our education system is not fit for purpose. It doesn't reflect or serve our community. The system really is failing our children, and in particular, our young Black boys. The call to decolonize our curriculum is long overdue, and there are many educators all around the world who have been fighting for this for a very long time, and we cannot let these changes be tokenistic. There is no point in changing the text that we're going to study unless the minds of those who are interacting with our children have been decolonized too. For example, I can remember my Year 9 history lesson, learning about the transatlantic slave trade and being asked to think of pros of slavery. I remember my Year 10 history lesson and being told by my history teacher that Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. So we cannot start looking at our curriculum until the minds of those who are teaching our children have been decolonized. And I think there are some really important steps that we need to take before we can do this. And the first step is a conversation. And this just isn't within our schools, this is within our local authorities, within the union as well. And this conversation is a continuing conversation, a continuing dialogue with everyone from our teaching assistants to our premises officers to our admin teams and senior leaders. There is no one who is exempt from this conversation. As a school, we need to be discussing what white privilege means, white supremacy, microaggression, and what these look like within our workplaces. And it's also really key for the experiences of Black staff to be heard and adequately addressed. And unfortunately, like many Black educators, I've experienced racism firsthand at school, and I found that the system did not support me. And this is why it's important for these conversations to be had. The second step is to read. Like right now is time for us to do our homework. It's important that we all understand the depth that our society has gone to erase the Black presence from our history books. And it's really important as well to know that there are lots of organisations and people who have dedicated their lives and time into making sure that this has been documented properly. For example, the Black History Studies, Know Your Caribbean, the Culture Yard and the Black Curriculum, just to name a few. So it's really important that we use the resources that are out there. And finally, this is a fight for everyone. No matter what your school population looks like or wherever you are in the world. In the UK, Black teachers make up 3% of the work, and we can't do it alone, nor do we want to do it alone. This is a fight for everyone. And it's really important that in these discussions, our children are centred in this and their opinions need to be heard and voiced because we are doing this for them. And just like one of my union colleagues gave me this quote last week, and she said, "It can't be about us without us." Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. That's really, really point there to finish with. As well, sort of raised very important points around teaching the truth and the importance of anti-racism being a fight for everyone. So thank you very much. Our next speaker is Christel Williams-Hayes from the Chicago Teachers Union, which is an inspirational trade union in the US. Has had a big influence on our union in the UK. I know when I did my rep training, we did case studies and we did sort of work with examples of what they've done in the United States. So really, really honoured to have her here today. She's been work education for over 26 years as a union delegate, organiser and field representative. She's the vice president on the executive board of the Illinois Federation and holds a seat with the American Federation of Teachers. She's a licensed minister and member of the Order of the Eastern States. Just going to hand over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm always excited to be in your space. I think I started being around you when I was like 7. I was coming to Operation Breadbasket with my grandmother back in the 60s. So this is not new for me, dealing with what we're dealing with today. You've been fighting for a long time. And somehow I got in there and somehow it stuck with me. But thank you for having us today. Yeah, we have been dealing with a lot of things. As our members were preparing to end the school year with remote learning, we were challenged with the outrage of George Floyd's death. And most recently, the young man that was gunned down in Atlanta that now we fear may cause more disruption in our communities. These actions again prove that there is no racial balance in America, nor is there leadership from our president to bring resolve, especially in education. So in Chicago, we've really worked hard to fight for social justice. And I remember during our negotiations, people, would say really mean things like, what are you fighting for? You just want more money? No, we want equality. We want our Black and brown children to have equal resources and equitable things when it comes to education. So we were fighting for that. And a lot of times people just didn't understand that. And we're going to continue to fight for that. Most recently, it has been brought up again about policing in the schools, and the actions of officers today proves again what we've been fighting for years, that they shouldn't be there. We would like for them to be removed. We are really pushing for those funds to be put into the buildings to provide more counseling services for our students and nurses and things that will bring restorative justice. It's sad that a lot of times when kids go to school and a child that you never know is dealing with whatever refuses to sit down in the classroom, and the teacher calls for security, and then here comes a police officer, and then that kid, of course, takes up a defense for himself, and then he gets balled up with the police officer, and then the next thing you know, he's handcuffed and he's scuffling with the police and he's taken off to jail, all because he didn't want to sit down, or he talked too much, or he called someone else a name. We don't want those services provided in the buildings for our students. We want everyone to receive the same education, the same services, and we want them to be taught how to deal with conflict. And we're not getting that when you have police officers in the building who are not trained to do that, but yet take them and just ship them on off and, take them on off to jail. So yes, we're continuing our fight for that. We think that we have already mandated by positions taken in our bargaining and most recent contract to reduce police and increase wraparound services, resolutions democratically passed for police accountability for supporting Black Lives Matters in school in this week of actions. During COVID-19, we sponsored a TV show that will be closing out on this Friday. And in that show, we had several segments about Black Lives Matter. It was important for us to do that. It was an opportunity for us to share that knowledge with our students. I don't know if you do know it or not, but I remember when I was in high school here in Chicago, we had Black history as a curriculum. I mean, you could really pick Black history as a class. We don't have that anymore in Chicago. So it's important for us to really push for change. And I remember my pastor sharing this story about an organist coming into the church and wanting to move the organ. So he turned the organ all the way around, and the congregation just went in an uproar, and he moved it back. And every week he would come to church and he would move that organ an inch and inch and inch. And before you knew it, it was back to where he started. They didn't notice it. The change came. So little by little, we want to make sure we make that change. It's taken us a step. It's taken us to get out and rally. It's taken us to have Jesse Jackson on the scene. It's taken these types of panels to put the word out there, because we want the change that our students deserve to have in America and within Chicago. And we want there to be a balance for them. And we want them to receive the justice, the restoration that they need to deal with conflict, how to resolve conflict. And that's what we're fighting for. And we're happy to work with grassroots, collaborative organizations. We're doing a lot of work with them. So we're really happy to have them with us, and we'll continue the work that we're doing.
Brilliant. Thank you, Christel. I think it's a real sort of feature of the Chicago Teachers Union and teacher unions in the US about that real strong work with the community, something that we're trying to sort of build on in the UK. And sort of interestingly sort of mention around school-based police officers, which is seen increasingly in the UK. I know where I live in Greater Manchester, there's sort of plans to expand that. And the union work we're doing is building on the arguments that have been done by unions in the US, such as yourself. We're going to bring another speaker and then have some questions. So our next speaker is the Vice President-elect of the National Education Union. It's DanielKebede, who is a tireless campaigner and instigated the NEU's first conference on decolonized education, which was in December. He's also played a big role in setting up a Black Reps network developing our organising forum structures for Black members. And so during the pandemic as well, has sort of set up weekly Zoom calls for our members for support, guidance, as well as developing collective sense of solidarity during this pandemic. So I'm going to hand over to you, Daniel. Have we got Daniel on? Right, we're gonna move on to some questions. In fact, that's what we're gonna do. So, first question is for Karina. Karina, this is from Thomas Woodruff. How can we pressure exam boards off-call to broaden the curriculum so that we address Black history and histories of racism, slavery, and empire? This is not being done to a satisfactory level at present. Can we bring Karina on?
May I make a point? While we're waiting.
Yeah, go on, Reverend.
Sometimes people don't make a distinction between personal racism and system racism. When Rosa Parks on the bus was arrested, it was not just an attitude of the bus driver. A sign above the driver, he had the red color from the rear, whites from the front. It was violently punished by law. Now, she was well behaved, all that. The system put on the back. The system had her arrested, not just the bus driver. We can't settle just for the bus driver's attitude. Law changed behavior. Some years ago in America, we had a breakthrough in baseball by Jackie Robinson. And he survived the test. He made the team. But what made the game really universal was a guy named Kurt Flood. Some years later, tried to sell him from one team that he refused to be sold. He's not a slave, he can't be sold. He won that lawsuit. So today, whether you're in Britain or Africa, wherever you're, free agencies because of Kurt Flood. The guy, he forced the owners to share power with the players. So attitudes is important, behavior is more. The law affects behavior. Attitudes can catch up. The law affects behavior. We must make deprivation illegal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we bring Karina in now to answer the question from before, just on off-call and what can we do with exam boards to pressure them to take into account Black history in the curriculum?
I think it's important to do what lots of us are doing now, which is to organise and mobilise together. It can't be done individually. If as departments we're getting together and we're working and we're going to our senior leadership teams and saying, you know, we do not feel like these topics are fit for purpose, and we're writing together to our exam boards, that's where the change will come. So I think it's about organising and working together within your departments and then bringing that to your leadership teams. Your leadership teams are bringing these to your local authorities, and then you're writing as a collective unit. I think that's how we bring about that change. But it has to be done together.
Thank you, Karina. I believe Daniel's okay to come in now?
I'm here, Vic. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I think just before I was about to get brought in, Zoom kicked me out and then I've had to log back in and everything. But thank you, Vik, for this, and thanks for everything you're doing in the NEU. In fact, I'd like to start by just saying a big thank you to everyone who helped organise today, particularly the staff, Sir Henry, Mike, Huda, and of course Karen, who have been absolutely unbelievable. Today's a really important event, isn't it? Solidarity is something that needs to be worked at. Unity is something that needs to be worked at, and that includes unity and solidarity across borders. So it is absolutely amazing to be on this panel with such esteemed fighters in the Reverend Jesse Jackson and in Diane Abbott, along with Christel from the CTU and our superb Black activists from the NEU. Black Lives Matter is a global concern. Now, the murder of George Floyd has rightly shocked the world. It's rightly made us as a collective sick to our stomachs, but we've been sick before, we've hurt before, we've sinned the words, we've heard the words, I can't breathe before. But what makes it different this time for me, I feel, is that millions of people in cities around the world are rising up and they're demanding fundamental change. And we need that fundamental change here too, because the racism that murdered George Floyd is 4 centuries years old, and it has its roots right here in the United Kingdom. The racism that killed George Floyd wasn't just born here in the UK, it exists here in the UK today. Every time there's an assassination, an atrocity, a murder committed against a black man in America by a racist police officer, I am reminded that there are families here in the UK who still do not have justice. Janet Older still does not have justice for her brother Christopher. Carol Duggan still does not have justice for her nephew Mark. The families of Rashan Charles, Edson DaCosta, Ezell Rodney, Alaseni Lewis, Darren Cumberbatch, they still do not have justice. And our children are not immune from state violence or from police brutality. 50% of children who are tasered by the police in the UK are from a black background. 70% of children who are tasered by the police in London are from a black background. More than half of children in prison in the UK today are from a black background. This should be a national disgrace. So I am not surprised to see people on the streets of Newcastle, of London, of Manchester, joining those in Minneapolis, because racism is an international pandemic. But do you know what does give me hope? I was speaking to a friend. I was speaking to a friend this week, Vik, and she lives in Derby, and she said that Black Lives Matter protests in Derby were the biggest that she's seen for a long time. And it wasn't just black people on the protests. The protests were diverse. It was black and it was white and it was united. And the fight for a society rooted in social justice needs to be fought along those lines. That's how we keep fighting together as working people, because it's in all our interests to fight racism. And that also means racism, taking on the racism that exists in education and in our schools. The toppling of the Colston statue exposed a weakness in our education system. This isn't the fault of educators, but of policymakers. Right now, children are taught a distorted version of Britain's history. The brutality and the violence of slavery and of colonialism is airbrushed out of existence in our education system, but we all have a right to know about the realities of the past. We should all know about the crimes of Colston, the horrors of the Royal Africa Company, the lives of the hundreds of thousands of men, women and children who had their chests branded with RAC. We should all know how many lives perished and were thrown into the Atlantic during that crossing from Africa to the Americas. And we should all know that Colston is far from the only beast that has been immortalized in this country with their own monuments, with their own buildings and streets. It's fundamentally dishonest to celebrate people like Colston without educating the population about the atrocities of the empire, of the atrocities of colonialism and slavery. It is lying on an industrial scale. So we should also learn. But also we should learn, that it was white workers as well who stood in opposition to slavery and went on strike in the Northwest against slave-made cotton. History is nuanced and it should be taught on that basis. But it's not just us in the NEU that want to decolonise education. It's not just MPs like Zara Sultana or Diane Abbott. Hundreds of thousands of people have signed a petition calling for the truth to be taught when it comes to Britain's history. So we're going to build on this, and I'm really pleased to be part of the beginning of a campaign called Another Education, a coalition of educators and academics, a united front demanding the complete overhaul of the education system and to make sure that anti-racism is embedded at every level. But you know what I fundamentally believe? To decolonize education, to eliminate racist injustice, whether it's police brutality or disproportionate deaths due to COVID-19, we need to do the same thing, which is fundamentally shift the balance of power out the hands of the few and into the hands of the many. But I am hopeful. Like the Reverend says, we need to keep hope alive. An anti-racist majority exists in this country, I believe, and it's black and it is white, and it's when we stand together that our power multiplies. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for today, Vik.
Thank you, Daniel. Like, real powerful words there, particularly around the role that education plays in shifting that distribution of wealth and power, and sort of how education itself really looks at, we want it to teach the truth, don't we? And that's really, really important. So we've got some questions now. So these questions are for Daniel, Karina and Christel. Just feel free to come in. The first one is there a real risk that we end up distracted by racism in America and then play down the very real issues of racism in the UK? I often hear people expressing concern about racism in America and how horrible they find it there, but do not see it as an issue here. And that's a question from Samuel McCavanagh.
So Britain has a real problem with institutionalized racism in every sort of fundamental institution, and that is really pronounced in the criminal justice system, I believe. As I said, half of children who are in prison in the UK are from a black background. That is a disgrace. It's not just that either. You are more likely, by 50% more likely, to be sent to jail for the same crime as a white person if you're black in this country. So I think we need to recognise that America has a specific problem in the sense that I think there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of being killed by police if you're a black male. I mean, that is horrific. But I don't think we should take comfort in that it's not as bad here. That's sometimes what gets put to me. Oh, it's not as bad here. That we can't take comfort in that comparison. Racism, whether it's in the USA or the UK, needs to be completely and utterly opposed. And it's when we stand together across borders like we are doing today that our power multiplies, really.
Okay, Christel.
I totally agree. Systematic racism is not new. It's been relevant for years, and I think that we've often ignored it, because we have felt maybe a lot of times that we haven't had enough power to address it. But I think that, and I always say here in Chicago, listen, we just need to get boxes of Kleenex and just get in a room and get in a circle and just talk about it. It's not something that people are going to be comfortable with. We have to deal with the underlining racism. People don't even know that they're racist and they're racist. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go out here and lynch somebody, but you have an underlining racism that you haven't even identified. So we got to talk about these things, and we have to not hold it. I mean, as Black people, I was telling somebody the other day, I'll be 58 this year. I said, and I'll be doggone if I keep excusing myself. I'm always saying, oh, I'm sorry, pardon me. We do that, we do it so often, especially in the circle of white people. I'll say that. We always got to pardon ourselves, and we have got to deal with racism. We have got to stand on who we are. We have to own who we are and be bold in what we are, and we've got to talk about it. And it's going to make people uncomfortable. It's going to make people cry, but we've got to deal with it. We've got to face it and look that demon in the eye and say it is wrong. And if we don't do that, we will continue to have these episodes, and people are not wrong for getting in the streets and protesting and talking about these things. That's okay. But at some point, we have to deal with it and deal with that truth.
Thank you, Christel.
I'm concerned that racism is more than a conversation deep, more than skin deep. Whites are born into privilege.
That's right.
effort and hard work and excellence means a lot. Inheritance and access means more. And so we talk a lot about unity. And the blind see the one-eyed person is in charge. It's not enough to become a great A student in Britain and go to Oxford and come out with your mind all messed up. We must change. There's some assumptions that must change. But what's important? Who is human? Britain is wealthy because of Africa, because of the Caribbean. Teach that history. And I'm concerned that we confuse attitude and behavior. In the individual white people changing their attitudes is important. But law, in 1965, blacks couldn't vote. White women couldn't serve on juries, 18-year-olds couldn't vote. Couldn't vote on campus, couldn't vote bilingually. That affected behavior. We had the right to vote. Now, there's a black man in Montgomery and Birmingham and law change, but we need to have law. We must make racist behavior illegal. And that means we might have an agenda and put some investment in it. If the kids in Brixton can't go to Oxford, nothing wrong with their brains, something wrong with the system. Right. We must take on the system and teach children their formative years that they matter.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Take on the system. Absolutely strong words there. One more question. This question is for Karina. How do we have discussions about race and meaning of structural racism amongst staff who perhaps still hold a limited good-bad personal understanding of what racism is? This was not part of my PGCE training, which is teacher training, and I've seen white teachers hold deeply racist ideas about the kind of literature worth teaching. For example, shouldn't training workshops be compulsory in all schools? That's a question from Mustafa for Karina.
Yeah, there is a big problem, and I think, like we've discussed also within the NEU, that it needs to start from teacher training. However, within our schools, for those of us already in schools and teaching, I think it has to come from our senior leaders, and the onus shouldn't be on Black teachers to facilitate these discussions. It needs to come from our senior leaders, and probably some of our senior leaders need to have training about this issue as well. And it shouldn't be seen as an add-on, or, if you feel uncomfortable, you're not part of the conversation. Just like other staff meetings and things that happen at school, it should be compulsory, and it's something that we kind of have to get over in terms of how can we do it. We just have to start doing it, and action has to happen. And that's where education comes in terms of reading different books around race. But it's really important for our senior leaders to get on board with this properly so that they feel comfortable in sharing this with their staff. So of course, Black educators should be involved in this conversation and how it's facilitated. However, our leaders have an onus to make sure that it's conducted correctly.
Thank you, Karina. And no, there's real strength of union as well, and those schools do need to listen. And what's going to make that more likely is by, rather than us going individually, we do that collectively in our sort of union structures. So we're going to move on to now our final section of speakers. The first one is Venda Premkumar, who is a fantastic activist, English teacher in a secondary school, and district secretary for Redbridge NEU. Handing over to you, Venda.
Thank you, Vic, and what a privilege to be on a panel of speakers such as this, and to be speaking on such an important issue as well. Unfortunately, the idea of Black Lives Matter less begins in schools, because what we are teaching our children in schools is a whitewashed version of British history and culture. I'm a secondary school teacher, and this is what the curriculum looks like through the eyes of an English teacher. Over 2 years of GCSE English literature course, we teach 2 plays. Both playwrights are dead white males. We teach a novel. The author is a dead white male. We teach 15 poems, and only 2 of the 15 poets are Black, and only 5 are female. Britain is homogenous, and it is white, Christian, and predominantly male. This is the message our Black students, our white students, our female students are hearing. The truth is, our students live in a 21st century modern Britain, and yet we offer them an insular and regressive curriculum that is nostalgic for the past. Our students live in a Britain that is diverse and it's multicultural, and yet we subject them to a curriculum that is deliberately designed by policymakers to marginalize Black voices, narratives and achievements. Let me give you another example. Like most schools, we teach Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. We discuss with our students that being a social reformer, Dickens wrote the novel to highlight the plight of poor in Victorian England. However, Dickens ignores the fact the British Empire was destroying indigenous populations all over the world and looting from them. Dickens, for all his moralizing in the novel, also fails to comment on the fact that Britain was profiteering from slavery at this time. But it isn't just Dickens who is silent on Black history of Britain. As educators constrained by an exam factory culture, we too have become complicit in erasing Black history in our schools by not talking about empire and slavery. Because in an exam-driven system, there is no space for this holistic and truthful exploration of literary texts. But the truth of the matter is, Britain is a multicultural country thanks to its long history of immigration. Romans, Vikings, Normans, people from British colonies, European migration, to name a few. So why is there such a concerted effort to whitewash and airbrush our history? Presently, schools function to successfully perpetuate the structural racism and inequality that exists in society. So it isn't just our Black students who are disadvantaged, it is our working class students, it is our special educational needs students, minorities and females. This is because policymakers must surely want our children to know their place in our hierarchical society. So in reality, Black students have to leave formal education in order to educate themselves about their roots, about their heroes, and discover their own voice. Where schools fail, Black families are having to work really hard at home to undo the damage and empower their sons and daughters by building self-esteem far away from school settings. But this lockdown period has given us educators a welcome time for reflection. And we want to liberate our students from this education system that is unquestionably institutionally racist. The tragic and painful death of George Floyd has been the catalyst. Toppling statues is good, but do you know what? A curriculum that isn't decolonized is far more pernicious and damaging. So Black and white educators alike are organizing through their union groups to demand a more diverse and inclusive curriculum. We're grateful for the leadership from our union. However, every educator, Black or white, needs to play their part in this. So for example, in Redbridge District, where I work, we've organized a meeting called Creating an Anti-Racist Curriculum to arm our educators with the tools and ideas to decolonize the curriculum. And we're calling all districts to do the same if it isn't happening already. As educators, we may not have a choice about the content we teach, but we do have a choice about how we teach it. For example, I vow never to teach Dickens again without referencing slavery and empire. And going forward, instead of 1 month of Black history in October and 11 months of white history, we will adopt an anti-racist practice for 12 months of the year. Instead of teaching British values, as the curriculum demands us to, we will promote global human values because our students are residents of the world. We want to dismantle the current prevent strategy, which alienates and criminalizes our Muslim students. And instead, we will incorporate the importance of Arabic culture throughout history into our teaching. The NEU and us educators want to reclaim the education system for all our children. And so, yes, we're hopeful. So no future generation will have to assert what should be obvious: Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Venda. Some real powerful words there, talking about the disconnect between the curriculum and the lived global experience of our students. You know, talking about the pressure from the exam boards as well. You know, for me, my family's from Pakistan. I didn't know the role of the British Empire until after I left school, which is a damn indictment of our education system. So thank you very much for that. Our final speaker, before having some more questions after that, needs no introduction, Diane Abbott. So Diane Abbott is the MP for Hackney North. This weekend marked the 33rd anniversary of her becoming the UK's first ever Black woman MP. She's been an amazing ally to Black people and to fighting racism throughout all that time, and has weathered the worst racism and sexism, yet still she rises. Handing over to you, Diane.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this important meeting. I've always been very concerned about education, particularly the education of working class children and children of colour. And the first thing to say is that for my parents' generation, the Windrush generation, they had it tough, they suffered blatant discrimination in housing and employment, but they always believed that for their children, it would be better. And the means by which they thought it would be different for generations to come was education. People from all corners of the British Empire believed in education passionately. So I have always felt that one of the biggest betrayals of the British state, of people of colour, is the way the education system has failed children of colour and sought to stigmatise children of colour, whether it's through exclusions or anything else. But first of all, we have to look at the structure of our education system, and we have to look at who's doing the teaching. And I believe strongly that we need a teaching workforce, particularly in our big cities, that looks like the children that it's trying to teach. And I believe it's very important that we continue to recruit, encourage, and promote teachers of colour, not because only teachers of colour can teach children of colour, but because children need, if you can't see what you can't be. You can't be what you can't see. And children need to see teachers of colour in the staff room to help them believe the world of education is for them. And also, if you have more teachers of colour, it means an enriched experience for all children, not just Black children or Asian children or minority ethnic children, for all children. So first of all, there's a lot more to be done in terms of recruiting and encouraging and supporting teachers of colour. For many years, I've run a project called London Schools and the Black Child. And I looked at a range of issues, which I'm going to touch on in a few minutes. But one of the things I looked at was teachers. And I can remember many young Black teachers who told me how isolated they felt in the classroom. And that's something we can all think about. How do we encourage people to go into teaching, and how do we support them once they get into teaching? So there's an issue about the teaching workforce. And there's also an issue, which others have touched on before me, about the curriculum. I, all those years ago, went to grammar school, went to Cambridge, and you know, I never had the opportunity to learn anything about the history of Black people in this country, about the history of empire, about the contribution of people of colour. Nothing at all. How I found out about it was teaching myself from my own reading. And I think it's wrong in 2020 in a globalized world when colonialism and empire is so much part of British history that we still have a teaching curriculum which doesn't reflect the reality of colonialism and empire and, yes, slavery. Because one of the extraordinary things about the debate of the toppling of the slave trader in Bristol, one of the extraordinary things about that debate was it showed how very many people weren't facing up to Britain's role in the slave trade, how the profits from slavery didn't just fund philanthropy, it funded the Industrial Revolution. And it does seem to me we need a curriculum which teaches people more facts about the slave trade. It's not just about Wilberforce fleeing the slaves. It's about what the slaves did to organize in Haiti and here to combat slavery. And it's about the role that the economics of the slave trade and the money Britain made from slavery, the role it played in the British economy going forward. We also need a curriculum where children of all colors can read books by writers of color, hear about poetry by poets of color. It cannot be right that in 2020, we're not reflecting the diversity of our society and the diversity of our literary and artistic world. So we need more teachers of color. We need a genuinely diverse and decolonized curriculum, not because we want to be nice to people of color, because it's better for everybody to have a diverse curriculum which reflects the reality of the past and the reality of the world around us. So, of course, we've seen the awful killing of George Floyd. We've seen the awful demonstrations by, I have to say, right-wing racists in central London this weekend who'd come, they said, to protect their statues. But of course, they couldn't recognize any of their statues. And one of them ended up urinating next to a little statue, a little plaque for the poor policeman, P.C. Palmer, who had died. That's how much they know about the statues. We need to understand that we cannot afford not to combat the racists in our midst. We cannot afford to challenge their mythology. The idea that the debate around racism and institutional racism that the Black Lives Matter campaigners have tried to start has just become a debate around Churchill is extraordinary. I was amazed this morning to hear the Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying he was going to set up a commission to look at inequality. I've never heard such patronising nonsense. He doesn't need to set up a commission. There's a whole series of commissions and inquiries. David Lammy's inquiry into race inequality in the criminal justice system, the Windrush inquiry, going back to the Macpherson, even actually going back to the Scarman report, which wasn't fully implemented. Boris doesn't need to spend 5 minutes on a new commission. He just needs to implement some of the very important recommendations, including about things like teaching and the teaching of history, that are in some of the existing reports that we've seen down the years. The problem is not that we don't have the information to combat institutional racism, is that all along politicians have lacked the political will. So if you're talking about combating institutional racism, education is at the heart of it. The role of educationalists is at the heart of it. And supporting all of our children, black and white, to understand their world better and to fight unfairness better is at the heart of it. So this is a very important event in a very timely period after we've had the Black Lives Matter campaigning. And as I say, fighting institutional racism, it's not about being nice to people of colour, it's actually about building a better and stronger society going forward. So I'd like to congratulate you all for coming. I'd like to thank all of you, many of whom I don't know, but I know are working really hard on these issues in your schools and in your communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Diane. Most absolutely right to highlight the role of education in terms of tackling institutional racism. We need to teach the truth so young people understand the realities and the past struggle, which is too often erased. Before we go on to questions, Reverend Jesse Jackson Snr, did you want to say hello to Diane and maybe whether you had any comments? I want
to express my thanks, Diane. In the 70s, she led the drive along with Bernie Grant to end apartheid in South Africa. I went to South Africa in 1979, got in quite by chance. I never made a statue before going. I found out why Britain would not oppose South Africa. The single biggest government building in all of South Africa was the British Embassy. South Africa, Britain was benefiting mostly from South Africa, slave labor, in the 80s. When people are taught, one's the host, one's the parasite, hosts don't like parasites. We're co-hosts. And I was thinking about, Diane, what happened to me in the first grade school, we learned arithmetic, how to count, add, subtract. And the second grade kids say, that's easy. Next we teach them math and algebra. And so we got to second grade, sure enough, all of us had read and we did poorly. Teachers didn't assume we were, she had said, well, we couldn't do the algebra. We came with Michelle on the desk, 2 apples cut, half dollar, dime. We said dime, how many dime make $1? 10. We learned the practical dimensions of algebra and math. We studied. She could have said we were stupid, we didn't pass her test. There's something wrong with her. And she brought it down level. So that in teaching, caring matters. That's what what your children learn matter. Then we thank you, we need you, Diane, as never before. Thank you so much, my dear.
Fantastic. Thank you, Reverend. Two absolute inspirational figures of our movement. Got 2 questions for you, Diane. The first one is from Dominic Stevens. What teacher made the most impact upon you and why? And the second question is from Kim Tonks. How do we address the issues associated with police brutality against Black individuals while still trying to teach young people to respect the police and the law?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, the teacher who I remember who made the most impact on me was an English teacher, and she was called Miss Landry. And I remember her to this day. She was quite small, she had long dark hair, and she was a great supporter of mine. But one of the reasons she made an impact on me was when I started in my secondary school, it was a grammar school, and I had my very first English lesson with another English teacher. And I'd always been really good at writing stories and essays and so on. So I had my first lesson, she handed out an essay subject. The next lesson, she read out the marks. Now, remember, at primary school, I always used to get A's. So she went through the marks, A minus, B plus, B, and I was puzzled. What had happened to my mark? So she went all through the marks from A to D and didn't mention me. So I put up my hand and I said, what about my story? And she said, I'll speak to you afterwards. And I went up to her after the class and she picked up my essay between her thumb and forefinger and said, where did you copy that? Because she could not believe that a Black girl, I was the only Black girl in the school, obviously, could write a story like that. And that really that really battered my confidence. So the teacher that had the most impact on me was the English teacher I had the following year, who really believed in me and enabled me to come out of my shell. In terms of young people in the police, it is a very difficult issue. Some commentators were saying, why are English people marching about George Floyd? And I had to say, well, that's because these issues about police brutality, they resonate here in England because there are so many incidents. Even in Stoke Newington, we've had a series of deaths in custody, going all the way back to Colin Roach in the 80s, and then Rashan Charles a few years ago. I think you do have to teach children their rights. You do have to teach them that they can speak up for themselves, because in a way, if children understand what their rights are, they're better able to deal with any problems they might encounter. But it is difficult. I don't doubt it, because for all the years that I've been campaigning on police brutality, it's still an issue.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you very much. And got two questions for Venda. The first question is, what can we do to encourage more Black pupils to apply to the teaching profession so that there is a larger body of teachers from which to recruit? And the second question, so that was from Judith Aegis. The second question from Colin Brown, as teachers, we can influence our learners. How do we educate the wider community? Educating our learners in isolation will not solve the wider racism problem. Just handing over to you, Venda.
Good questions, tough questions. More Black students to become teachers. I think the profession has to be made appealing, to be honest. I think as teachers, we get denigrated quite a lot. It's a very important profession. We are preparing the next generation. So I think the profession in itself has to be appealing. And one way to do it is to make our school, all our schools, anti-racist. All our students, Black, white, or female, whatever, have to find the school experience an interesting and engaging and motivating one. And an important part of that, I think, is also, and encouraging specifically Black students, is their experience of school has to be positive. The example we heard from Diane is heartbreaking, really, the first experience. So we want to avoid things like that. So if we're going to encourage more Black students, we need every school in the country to adopt an anti-racist, not just being non-racist, because we know that's not good enough. That hasn't done enough for us. We want an anti-racist approach, not just in the curriculum, but across the whole school, because, racism is systemic. So we need an anti-racist attitude that is also systemic. So I think that would encourage more students to become teachers. In terms of getting the message out to the wider community, one of the things that we've done in districts, so I'm in a privileged position because I'm a district secretary. One of the things we've done is we've held parents' meetings on why we, on things such as why we think, schools should only open when it's safe. We've held meetings on improving education. We should be calling wider meetings. You should be calling meetings with parents and involve them in this important issue, because when you do, you will hear lots and lots of stories come out about the unfairness, but it's because people, educators and parents, if they join forces, this would be so much more powerful. So that's what I would say, calling parents alongside alongside the union and other community groups would definitely help get our message out there, because we can't really afford to have another generation go through this curriculum or go through these experiences.
Well, white children are taught they're superior, and they believe it. Blacks are taught white superior, and they believe it too. We've internalized racism. We must resist it. We must not adjust. We must resist racism. And that's a counterculture curriculum. And teachers who are on the supremacist side of history, they will not teach counterculture. They teach against themselves. That's why we have to have teachers who will teach counterculture. Britain believes white people are superior. America believes white people are superior. Unfortunately, many blacks believe it too, but as we break out of believing that, that's the attention. As long as they believe we believe it, it's all right. We're resisting the idea that we're inferior. Therein is attention.
Thank you, Reverend. Just before I make my closing remarks, first Reverend and then Kevin, would you like to just sort of say a few final comments? Starting with you, Reverend.
I'm delighted to be with you on this call today as we internationalize our struggle. When I was in South Africa and I left Britain in '79, I went to South Africa. I got in quite by chance, and I thought I was easy in the country. I was a bit naive. A lot of press was at the airport. So why are you here? So I'm here to visit friends and Bozak and people. Why are you here? So I just want to see, it's why you were there. So, well, what do you believe? So I believe human rights, all human beings measured by one yardstick. That's it. Out of human rights, but all human beings measured by one yardstick was offensive to that system. We must, again, those who are there fighting the system must be taught counterculture. I mean, you're hostile, I mean, you're wise. And really, racism is not good for white people. It's not good for black people. We're all God, we're not superior and inferior. We're all, well, I like about the football analogy on the football field. The kids can come from Ghana and start from London or from Germany and start from Britain, start from Germany. Whenever the playing field is even, rules public, gold, silver, pretty fast, score, transparent, we can make it. Even playing field. It's not true in education and healthcare and jobs. Even playing field, public rules, field goals, scores transparent. On those conditions, we can all make it. Thank you so much, guys. Look forward to coming to Britain, meet you again real soon. Through the country again with Operation Black Gold and Woolly. Love you guys. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Reverend. And Kevin?
Well, I'd like to thank you, Vik, for chairing, the Reverend for the support he's given to this National Education Union event, to Diane for the consistent support she's given to educators and to the NEU. But most of all, you know, I'll say again, it's not the job of black people alone to fight racism. It's the job of white people to be part of that fight. But it's also important for white people to listen to the experience of black people, and listening to Karina, to Venda, to Daniel, to Christel, to know there are so many, and yourself, Vik, so many fantastic black educators in our schools in this country and in the US. It does give you some hope that working together we can bring about some change. It's a historical moment. The Reverend links back to other historical moments, the Martin Luther King advance, but there's a historical moment now with this massive upsurge, and we have to make use of this moment, the mobilization of not just black people, but you see in these demonstrations, you see white people outside along black people saying all lives have to matter, black lives have to matter too, and they have to matter in education. So thank you everyone who's been on the call. It's been, I think, a historic call for the National Education Union. Really pleased to be with you all. Thank you very much for letting me be part of this event this afternoon.
Thank you, Kevin. And just want to say to all the speakers, though, massive thank you for participating. Also to everyone who's listened in to today. So I sort of read in the comments, what are the next steps, what we're going to do about this. And for those of us in schools, get active in your union. It's a lot more effective if we do things collectively, and it's our right to have an anti-racist workplace. So we know that black students are more likely to get excluded, have worse educational outcomes. That needs to change, and us unifying and building using things like the anti-racist frameworks to be incredibly important in doing that, as well as in terms of the profession, encouraging more black students become teachers, doing things and influencing things like anti-racist teacher training is also going to be incredibly important. But also what happens in the community is also vital. We live in a society where if you're black, you're less likely to have access to good housing, to decent healthcare, to decent wages. No, these things cannot continue. And it's important that as trade unionists, we link the systemic racism in the education system to the systemic racism in wider society. So once again, solidarity, take care, and goodbye. Thank you.